And then transferring our attention to the breath. And just observing the breath without needing to control it. And trying not to get carried away by the thoughts, but just keeping the primary part of our attention on the breath. Spending a few moments contemplating how every single other being is just like us in wanting happiness, in wanting things to go well for them. And wanting to be treated with consideration and respect. And not wanting to be dismissed or ignored. Not wanting pain and problems. Not wanting to be poor or sick or to feel lesser. So contemplating with respect to the various people in our lives, the friends, the neutral beings, and even the difficult ones. So feeling that sense of commonality between ourselves and others at the very deepest level. having that sense of commonality between ourselves and all other human beings in this country, in South America, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Australia, everywhere. We're not as different as we think. At the very core, we have the same longing for happiness. Of course, we have different individual goals and methods to achieve those goals. But here we're trying to focus on that fundamental desire for happiness, that fundamental desire to be separated from suffering. And it's the same with animals. It's the same with all creatures, all beings. The cute animals, dogs and cats, chipmunks, but also the not so cute animals, the insects that Jackie was talking about, the cockroaches, the hyenas, the rats. All want to be safe. All want to have enough to eat and a place to live and some shelter. So if we think about it, there are countless other beings and there's one me. So how could our happiness be more important than that of billions and trillions and quadrillions of others? We all have this mistaken preoccupation with me and my happiness, my needs, what I want, my stuff, my friends, my family, my spouse, my children, out of a mistaken understanding, thinking that we're fundamentally separate from ourselves, from others. When we're in fact interdependent. And actually not ultimately separate. And from this belief in separation came the natural tendency to cherish ourselves most, or focus on our own life and our own needs first and foremost. But this preoccupation with me, this self-centered attitude, turns out to be the fundamental cause of our suffering, the fundamental cause of our samsara, along with the mistaken conception that we're separate from others. Due to these two conceptions of oneself as being separate, as well as being preoccupied with that me, they bring about all of our mental afflictions, our attachment, our obsessive desire to get what I want, and the fear of not getting what I want or losing what I have. It brings about our anger when we're denied what we want, or when we encounter what we don't want. When people don't treat us with respect or consideration. We become jealous of those who have what we want, or who have more. And all of the other mental afflictions, which all agitate our minds. And prevent us from experiencing a peaceful mind, a calm mind, a blissful mind. And And the afflictions also often propel us to speak harshly to others, distort the truth, speak badly about others. Or engage in like killing, etc., cheating, and creating other sorts of negative karma, unwholesome actions, which bring about all of the painful circumstances in our lives, painful situations in the future. And that self preoccupation carries with it, always carries with it, the potential for pain. The potential for mental disturbance. When things don't work out the way we want. When we don't get what we want. When we encounter what we don't like. And carries with us the potential to experience fear and anxiety, worry. So this self-preoccupation or self-centered mind is a weight, a burden that we carry around with us. And it prevents us from experiencing our potential. It prevents us from experiencing the everlasting joy and bliss and lightness. It prevents us from experiencing or achieving enlightenment, a state of lasting bliss and happiness. And instead, that self-centered mind causes us to get into conflict with others. Causes us to say and do things that we later regret. Causes us to hurt those that we love. Or causes us to not be there for the people we care about as much as we'd like. So we've been following this self-preoccupation for all of this life. And from beginningless time, according to Buddhism. And yet, it hasn't worked. Focusing on our happiness first. We have a lot of practice with that. And yet still, we suffer. Still, we get agitated. Still, we have problems. If following the self-centered mind brought happiness, we should all be supremely happy now. So, since it hasn't worked out so well, perhaps it's useful to try something different. Cherishing others as our primary focus. So cherishing others, genuine cherishing others, more and more brings joy. Brings a sense of fulfillment and meaning to our lives. So see if that's true, thinking about a time where you were just there for somebody else. You did something for somebody else that wasn't about me at all. How did that feel? With cherishing others, we have a more peaceful mind, a more happy mind, because we're not so concerned about how others treat me or whether I get what I want. We're trying to be of benefit to others, ourselves. We become less important in our own minds. And thus we're relieved of that burden that we carry around, or we lighten the load. When we cherish others more, we create a lot of good karma, a lot of positive imprints on our minds that will bring about better and better circumstances. We create more merit and speed up our spiritual progress. And ultimately, we achieve the everlasting state of peace and happiness. Complete enlightenment. As Shantideva says, whatever joy there is in the world, all arises from desiring others to be happy. And whatever suffering there is in this world all comes from desiring primarily myself to be happy. Shantideva also says, if I do not actually exchange my happiness for the suffering of others, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence shall have no joy. And in Lama Chopa, since cherishing myself is the doorway to all torment, while cherishing others, my mothers, is the foundation of all that is good. I seek your blessings to make my core practice the yoga of exchanging self for others. So the idea here is for us to really contemplate again and again the disadvantages of, being focused on my own happiness first. And the advantages of cherishing others, being more focused on others' happiness, or at least just as focused on their happiness as our own. So we contemplate that again and again until genuinely there's a shift in our mind and we become really convinced that the way to have greater happiness, the way to get what we really want, if what we really want is genuine lasting happiness, we can only get it through cherishing others more and more. Right? Not ignoring our own needs. Of course, we have to take care of our own needs. But not being so preoccupied by me, not considering my needs and wants as more important than others. So eventually, we reach a point of certainty that, oh yeah, the only way I'm going to get what get that lasting happiness is to cherish others, at least as important as myself. And if we don't, and then exchanging ourselves with others, right? Cherishing others more and decreasing our own self-centeredness. We will only do the exchange of self and others. We will only cherish others more and more if we've done this contemplation and developed some level of certainty. Yeah, I remember, once years ago, a dear friend of mine, she did retreat for many years. She did, many, many years of solitary retreat. And she's a person who just, as long as I've known her, has been a person who is always there for others, always giving, so, just a wonderful person. And she, in her retreat, one of her experiences in her retreat was, she said that she was convinced, even before her retreat, she was convinced that cherishing others was the key to happiness, was needed for happiness. But in her retreat, she actually had an unshakable realization of that fact. And and she's just an astonishing person. She's just always, always, always there for other people. But, but she takes care of herself too. She sets her boundaries. She knows what her limits are. Yeah, and it's very inspiring to be around someone like that. So anyway, when she told me that, I thought, I've never been that convinced of that fact. It's been kind of like a working hypothesis. But I notice the more I reflect on it, the more true it seems. So I want to open this up and see what other people think. Do you have resistance, or do you think it's true that cherishing others is the doorway to happiness? Or did you have any particular aha moments?
Am I unmuted?
Jackie.
For me, it's a theory versus practice issue. It seems like theoretically I can see like I am inspired by other people. I can see those that are selfless are also the happiest. So I know it's true, but but in my daily encounters, I see immediately where the walls and you know my all my defenses and walls, I only go so far. I'm very limited.
Yeah, and we all are, and it's a process, right? Absolutely. I mean, there's, the first step is just wanting, wanting to go in that direction, right? Becoming convinced so that we aspire to go in that direction. And then, yeah, there's of course there's a gap between where we want to be and where we are now. And that's practice, right? That just takes practice, and that takes, right? Mm, yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to talk about that a bit more in today's class, so maybe I won't talk about it right now. But yeah, I mean, it takes practice. It takes our meditation. It takes loving ourselves. It takes gradually expanding our capacity, right? But one interesting thing I notice is kind of the internal block of not really being convinced, right? It's like sometimes we don't want to cherish others. Like sometimes we just can't because we're just not there yet. And that's just natural. And then on top of that, sometimes there's this block of like this unconscious belief that we've been hanging, that's been there forever, of, well, you've got to take care of me first, right? That's our cultural upbringing, as well, for at least for many of us. um, that's what our culture is saying. And a lot of us carry around that still unconscious belief that, oh, well, I've got to take care of me first and foremost, or people will, step all over me, or, um, yeah, treat me like a doormat. Um, right. Which cherishing others does not mean letting people treat us badly. Um, but yeah, it just means not putting our own needs as being more important than others, and our own wants as being more important than that of others, and not always looking through the filter of me. How does that affect me? How can I get what I want out of that? And that's right, that's a long term endeavor. What do you think, Jackie?
Yes, yes. It, and even if I think I'm being uh, doing something without self in mind, it's very tricky. After the fact, you can see that the ego is attached. The conditioning is still there. So it is quite the process
Yeah,
to get.
yeah, absolutely. And that it will be there, right? It will be there until eighth bodhisattva bhumi, right? um yeah, and the idea is to not just automatically get sucked into it, right? To gradually expand our capacity, which no doubt you're doing.
Well, what gives me inspiration is that I can see before and afters from different people. And I see that my friends evolved. My little annoying friends when we were in our 20s and 30s back in the 80s. Oh my God, so much better. And that really gives me inspiration that progress can happen.
Yeah, yeah, good. And I'm sure you've progressed as well, but it's sometimes harder to see our progression.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
thing that I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Heather.
It's one of the reasons why I was attracted to Buddhism is that it's the way that I've sort of felt my whole life for as long as I can remember, this idea of using my life as a vehicle to be of benefit. And, I'm drawn to that. But what I struggle with is when it's practically applied, is this bodhicitta or is this like breathtaking codependence? Because I think that I do a lot of that. And there's only been a couple of times in my life when I got sober and when Chad died that I've been brought to my knees in a way that I'm like, I actually need the same things everybody else needs. I'm not hovering above humanity here, not needing care, because my tendency is I can take it, they can't. So I'll help before, and so I really struggle with that because I don't have a healthy sense of what is self-care and what's selfish. If
Okay,
that makes sense.
great. Thank you. Yeah, and that's one of the things we'll talk about today and next time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I was going to also add that I think this practice is really helpful with the pandemic. For me, I get a lot of fear, and sometimes I see judgment coming out when I'm trying to protect myself and others, but then I see someone with their mask off or their mask down, and I find myself getting very angry at them and not having a lot of compassion and thinking like, okay, why are you doing your part? So I think it's timely and really helpful to not, create this other, and to remember that everyone's suffering and maybe not everybody manages their feelings or their actions in the same way, but that doesn't mean that they aren't having similar underlying feelings about this difficult time.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this pandemic is a huge mirror for us, right? To see, right? To really help us practice, like see where our limits are, right? And see where our judgments arise and see where our fear comes up and see, where we're imposing our, our viewpoints on what people should be doing, on others, and, kind of looking down on others. Yeah, and that's all food for practice, right? And then we can try to see, as you're saying, right? Try to see that yeah, they've got their stuff just like we have our stuff. I mean, one of the keys I think in this practice is really challenging is to watch ourselves and not put ourselves above others, right? That we're right, we're like, they're struggling and they're doing maybe inconsiderate things, not being mindful of others. And when we're really honest, we also are sometimes not considerate of others and not mindful of others. And it's really generally, I think for most of us, it's not, we're not purposely being inconsiderate to others. We're just absorbed in our own thing, right? We're just absorbed, like we're just worried about our own health, or we're just pursuing what we want. And sometimes that affects others in an adverse way, and we don't really realize it. And I think a lot of people are going around doing that. They're just trying to get their needs met, and they have their own mental afflictions, their own attachments to what they want, and so they're doing what they want and pursuing what they want, without much thought about how it affects others. And this mask wearing is just that one's just a prominent example. I find it a very stark example of how much centeredness there is, right? Just, well, I don't want to wear a mask, or, or maybe I'll wear a mask over my mouth, but not over my nose. And right. And just thinking that, yeah, I mean, I should take care of my own needs first, and other people should just deal with it. Right. Get out of my face kind of thing. Anyway, I'm just kind of going on and on. All right, well, what I'd like to do is move into the next step in the 11-step method for developing bodhicitta, which, right, so we went through equanimity first, and then we went through the 3 steps of developing attractive love or affectionate love to develop, right, a sense of warmth or closeness or affection toward others, or to view, to see others in a positive light and attractive light. The traditional way is recognizing that all sentient beings have been our mothers, remembering their kindness and wanting to repay their kindness. So that's the traditional way, but we can also reflect on others' kindness in many other ways. The point is to develop the affectionate love. And then after the affectionate love comes the equalizing self and others. So that step, I think, is really important, where we can start with equalizing, exchanging self and others. As I mentioned, at least begin with, considering others' needs and wants as just as important as ours. And I think that's, for the most part, I think that we can do that in a healthy way, I think. But when we jump to cherishing others as more important than ourselves, that gets really tricky. So after equalizing self and others, then we reflect on the disadvantages of self, the self-centeredness, and the advantages of cherishing others. And then the next step number, whatever it is, step number 8, is actually at the actual thought of exchanging oneself with others. So this step is shifting our attitude. Like currently or habitually, most of us are focused on, me first, my needs first, my wants first, my stuff, my family, my friends, first, and cherishing others less than ourselves, right? Others' needs and wants are less important, even if they're just slightly less. They're less important than our own needs and wants. Right? So currently, our needs are more important, and the needs of others are less important. Then with equalizing, we're putting them as equal in importance. And then the exchange of self and others is then cherishing others more and cherishing ourselves less. And this can be very tricky. So we're replacing our self-centered attitude with cherishing others as being first. So in my viewpoint, we should start with the equal, and then gradually, organically, as we do these meditations and as our self-cherishing, our cherishing others increases, as our love and compassion for others increases through the practice organically. And as we do our practice, whatever it is, mindfulness meditation, as we reduce our mental afflictions, as we develop greater and greater inner peacefulness and inner wellness, right? Our own needs become less important. And then we can organically and in a healthy way cherish others more and more, right? We can't jump to cherishing others as more important to us than ourselves if we haven't done the inner work. We will end up crashing and burning or creating harm instead of helping oftentimes. So I think one kind of simple way to think about it is, so instead of asking, right, kind of unconsciously or consciously, just habitually asking, okay, well, what do I want? What do I need? As being the constant question in the background, throughout all the day. Asking ourselves more and more, well, what is more beneficial in this situation, right? What is more beneficial, for ourselves and others? What is more beneficial, right? If we encounter someone who's suffering, like instead of blocking our hearts and not trying to distance ourselves from that person's suffering and cherishing ourselves first, on the one extreme, and also on the other extreme, just kind of knee-jerk reaction of I have to help that person, taking a step back and thinking, well, what is more beneficial in this situation? Because sometimes helping another person is actually going to help them, and sometimes it actually hurts them. And I'm going to talk about that. So what does it mean? So ideally, this exchanging self and others involves helping others without it being about me at all, right? Like helping because there's a need, helping, right? Some child, like a child falls down, falls into the river or falls down in the middle of the street and there's a car coming, right? Just that running out into the street to help them, right? Without a thought of, well, this will make me feel good about myself, right? Or without the thought of, well, I hope people will appreciate me, or without the thought of wanting recognition, right? But just helping because there's a need, just like this spontaneous helping because somebody is suffering or somebody is hurt or somebody is sick, right? Helping without it being about me at all, right, is the ideal, the pure form of helping, right? Not looking for any any external rewards and not looking for internal rewards. So this is the pure form, ultimately, not looking for external rewards such as recognition from others, appreciation from others, or not looking for them to do us a favor in return. And also not looking for even for internal rewards, right? Not doing it so that we feel better about ourselves. We're not doing it so that we feel like we're a good person or we're a good practitioner, right? Ideally, not doing it out of a motivation for us to feel good about ourselves or for us to have any external kind of recognition or rewards. Yeah. And this is really tricky, you know, as Jackie was talking about, right? It's a process, right? It's a process. We have an ideal, but this is, you know, and we can work toward that. And in some situations we can do it. In some situations we're not there yet. But it's the ideal. Um, and we're not, you know, and we're not looking for any sort of internal or external reward, you know, before, during, or even after the action. So sometimes we'll just spontaneously help someone, or we'll be there for somebody who's you know, in pain. And you know, and it's not out of a sense of, you know, it's not about me at all. But then afterwards, we feel offended because that person doesn't thank us, right? Or doesn't acknowledge, right? So even afterwards, we try to just let go of any sort of attachment to recognition, or you know, any sort of reward for me. You know, so slowly, Chogyam Trungpa, you know, the author of Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, you know, a great teacher. He said that, you know, he talked about 3 stages of help, you know, of helping others. And the first stage is learning to love ourselves. Right? So learning to love ourselves without hating parts of ourselves. Right? So this, you know, learning self-love, self-acceptance, right? Learning to be really okay, really, you know, kind to ourselves, loving to ourselves, not in a self-indulgent way, but developing a genuine sense of self-acceptance, which I think is really hard for a lot of us. You know, a lot of us are, you know, think that we have to be perfect in order to be lovable, or, you know, we have to achieve, you know, achieve a certain level of success in order to be okay. But I think in order to really be able to practice bodhicitta and bodhisattva activity and help others in a truly healthy way, it needs to be on a basis of at least some, you know, of self-acceptance and self-love, right? Because otherwise, if we're acting out of a sense of needing to prove ourselves, right, or acting out of a sense of unworthiness, and especially unconsciously, that's when we can feed into things like codependency, where, right, we help others, like we need to be needed, so we help others, you know, in situations where we shouldn't be helping them, right? Like instead of empowering others, we are allowing others to become dependent on us, and thus not doing their own inner work, right? The classic example of it is, you know, enabling others addiction, right? Enable others drug addiction, and enabling others alcohol addiction. Instead of doing the hard work of helping others to help themselves, and sometimes, right, needing to be really strong with them and not doing what they want us to do, not giving them what they want, right? Sometimes, and then we're, you know, the kindest thing to do is to not give them what they really want, right? But to help them help themselves, right? So the bodhisattva activity is is helping others to help themselves ultimately. So the first step Chogyam Trungpa talks about is being, developing a healthy sense of love for ourselves, right? Not cherishing ourselves is more important than others, but the love and acceptance toward ourselves. And then the next step, he says, in helping others is developing a relationship with the other person, right? Developing a sense of trust with that other person, developing goodwill with that person, right? Instead of, Trungpa says oftentimes when we help others, we can easily like make a nuisance of ourselves. Like we can march into someone else's territory and tell them what to do, or I'm here to help you. Like disregarding whatever, kind of their boundaries are, disregarding what they want and what they need, right? Helping others can be about me wanting to help. But helping others is much more tricky than that. Trungpa says it's more about opening our own territory rather than marching into somebody else's territory, right? Like opening up our territory, being open to whoever, whatever the needs are in a particular situation, right? Rather than marching into somebody else's territory and saying, okay, I'm here to help, in a way that's ignoring what is actually beneficial in the situation. And, and I noticed this a lot with, taking care of my mother when she was, she's needs a lot of help these days. And it's very interesting because she has a lot of different helpers who come in, and it's very interesting to see which helpers are the ones that are actually benefiting, right? They all have their different styles, and which ones are the ones that really are benefiting her and she feels really comfortable with, and the ones that aren't working out so well. And there's one helper that she had that didn't work out for her. I mean, she was like a superstar helper, and she would work so hard to cook for my mom and buy foods, look for recipes because my mom has a special diet, look for recipes for her and clean. And she was a person who is a superstar worker. But what I noticed wasn't working out was that she would do what she thought my mom needed without really asking my mom, well, what do you want? She would cook things that my mom didn't even like, or, my mom would say, well, I don't like, bran muffins, but she would bake her bran muffins because they were good for her. But my mom wouldn't eat them, and we would just end up either I would eat them or my brother would eat them or we'd throw them out. And what my sense was about her was she was needing to be a good helper, right? It was about her sense of identity, right? Like she was doing what she needed to do rather than what my mom really needed and what my mom really wanted. So the helpers that have been really good for her, like she has one particular helper that is just, my mom couldn't live without her. And I really watch her, and she just, she asks my mom what she wants. Like she's been with my mom for like 6 years, but she always asks my mom, well, what do you want to eat? is there anything special you want me to do today? She knows what my mom needs, and she will anticipate my mom's needs, right? She'll communicate with her, ask her what she wants, ask her what she needs, and also anticipate her needs. She knows her well enough, so she knows, okay, well, she needs to take her medicine first. She knows, to put her water here and her medicine here. And so this helper is very much, my sense is she's very much about wanting to serve, right? Very much about wanting, to make my mom's life better, right? And it's not about her wanting to be a good helper. It's about my mom. Yeah. And so there's a humility there. There's a humility about, okay, well, what does my mom want? Asking her what she wants and what she needs, and doing what she wants, as long as, right, it's not going to be harmful for her. And, and she'll also stand up to my mom, when she's wanting to do something that's dangerous, like walk around without her walker or something like that. But she's engaging in this delicate dance of being there for my mom and being beneficial for my mom. And that reminds me of a teaching that by, I don't remember her name, Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And she talks about three different ways, three different ways of seeing life, or I think three different ways of, serving others. And she talks about it in terms of helping, fixing, and serving. Helping, fixing, and serving. And she says, when you help, you see life, or you see the other as being weak. When you fix, like oftentimes we think that we need to fix the problem, or the fixer, or fix that person. When we fix, we see life, or we see the other person as broken. But when we serve, you see life as whole. So in her language, so the ideal is to serve, right? So helping others is not about putting ourselves above the other, right? Well, I mean, in her terminology, help means putting ourselves above the other. But the bodhisattva activity is not about putting ourselves above. It's not about fixing someone who is broken. It's about serving. So helping, she says, is based on inequality. This is Joan Halifax wrote this amazing book. And she says, when we help, we may inadvertently take away from people more than we could ever give them. We may diminish their self-esteem, their sense of worth, integrity, and wholeness. Right? So this is something I really notice about my mom and old people in general, is that is not to do things for them that they can do themselves. Like my mom wants to be able to do things herself. Or I have another friend who's in her 80s. She wants to cook. She she had, I mean, not my mom, but this other woman, she has a tremor, and it, and it's hard to watch her, trying to cut her vegetables. And she actually feels offended when people say, oh, come on, let me do that for you. And she says, no, I want to do this myself, right? Because it makes her feel good, right? Like being able to do things for herself. I also have a neighbor who, who's elderly and she has cancer, and we offer to help, and she says, well, if I don't do these things, then I won't be able to do them, and so I need to do them for as long as I can, right? So we can, with all the best intentions, we can inadvertently diminish other people's kind of, their feeling of independence, their feeling of self-esteem, when we kind of march in and say, well, let me do that for you, right? It's tricky to sit back and just see, well, what is needed, and we can ask, right? And we often should ask, so we can inadvertently diminish others' self-esteem and their sense of worth, their wholeness. And Joan Halifax says, she says, when I help, I'm very aware of my own strengths. But we don't serve with our strength. We serve with ourselves. We draw from all of our experiences. Our limitations serve, our wounds serve, even our darkness can serve. The wholeness in us serves the wholeness in others and the wholeness of life. So this brings, I think a really important point, when we're serving others, is serving with respect, really treating the others with respect, treating the other person with dignity, right? Not looking at them as being lesser, not looking at ourselves as being the helper, but really treating the others, on an equal basis, with respect. Yeah. So getting back to Trungpa's 3 steps. So the first step, loving ourselves first. The second step, developing a relationship with them, right? So developing a relationship with them. So, that's not always true, right? To help the homeless person or something like that. But, being patient and developing, developing trust with another person, developing goodwill with another person. And then he says the third step is selfless help, right? So the third step is the ideal, helping the other because they're in need. He calls it, or, I keep using that word help, but, or we can say serving others without it being about me at all. And he uses the term environmental generosity, right? Being generous, serving because there's a need, but not from the viewpoint of ego or me helping. And so ultimately, right, the bodhisattva, right, the more we understand emptiness, the more we see that there is no self and no other, right? There is no separation between self and others. There is no duality between self and others. It can become like our hand, right? Like if we hurt our foot, right? The hand automatically reaches out to take care of that foot, right? The hand doesn't think, oh, well, I need to help that foot. The hand doesn't think foot is other. There's just an automatic helping. And ultimately along the path, the bodhisattva serves the other, or serves without othering the person or the being, right? That there's no separation fundamentally. It's like the hand reaching out to help the foot. Wow. Okay. So this cherishing others, serving others, right? We need to do it in a healthy way according to our own capacity, gradually growing our capacity, right? And being realistic about that. And it also involves setting our boundaries, right? One of the unhealthy ways of serving others is just ignoring our own needs, repressing our own needs, and just trying to be there for others. And then it can be this like endless stream of being there for others, and our energy, our enthusiasm, our mental health starts to diminish. And when that happens, that's a sign that we need to be setting some boundaries there and taking care of ourselves. I mean, I think of it kind of like if we're, let's say we're good at building and we're good at, physical work, and somebody wants us to help them build something, right? In order for us to be able to do that, we need to take care of our own body, so that our body is healthy and our body is strong, so that we can do that work. And similarly with our minds, right? If we're there for somebody else, right? Emotionally, other people's problems, or helping others, right? Or working with social justice, right? It's very easy to get burned out. It's very easy to get, overly exhausted and start getting resentful. So in order to prevent that, right, then that becomes, right, a downward spiral that can become very unhealthy. But we need to take care of our own mind, right, our own needs, right? We need to take care to make sure that we're rested enough. We need to take care that our mind remains healthy. Our mind remains keeps the good motivation, right? Keeps the positive motivation, and doesn't fall into, right, resentment, or I'm doing this out of a sense of duty, and I can't say no, I can't, right? We have to find that healthy balance where we maintain our strength and our health, while also being able to help others. Am I making any sense? I feel like I'm just talking. Let me see if there's any other points that I want to cover right now. Oh yeah.
Emily, you covered every one of the ways that I'm unhealthy and how I help. So at least we got that ground covered.
Likewise.
Yeah. Actually, there's this book called Standing on the Edge by Joan Halifax that I love, and I was thinking about maybe doing a book study with you guys on this book because it's so practical about, the pitfalls and of, in various areas. She talks about altruism and empathy, how you can go over the edge on altruism into unhealthy ways, also on empathy, going over the edge, also integrity, also engagement. I don't remember all 5 of them, but she talks about 5 states and healthy ways of orienting ourselves and unhealthy ways that I just find, I find that book just spectacular. So anyway, we can talk about whether anybody has interest in studying that together. Right. So another point that I wanted to make, and I kind of already said this, but serving others, right? Being, taking really good care of, being aware of and taking good care of our motivation for helping, like really being honest with ourselves about what is our motivation for helping, being in touch with what our motivation is for helping. Is it about me in some way? Is it right? I find the knee-jerk reaction to be very interesting to look at, in myself. Right? We can be, right? It's so hard to be present with someone's suffering, right? It's so hard to be present with the social injustice in this country and in the world without engaging in a knee-jerk reaction of having to do something to help. And oftentimes, right, because of our discomfort and inability to just bear witness to the suffering, we have to do something. And sometimes we do something when it's not appropriate, right? Or we do something when the appropriate thing is to not do anything. Like my my example that comes to mind in my own life with my mom is, right, she's on, right, she has advanced COPD, she's on oxygen 24/7, and she's still smoking, right? And that's so, right, well, it's not as hard now, but at first it was so hard for me to witness her doing that. And right, and I had to say something to her, right? And that was not a pretty scene. I tried to say it as skillfully as possible, and she's super defensive about it, so she just reacted, and it was just this huge. It became this huge thing, and yeah, and that was me. My knee-jerk reaction of having to say something to get her to stop smoking when she's not open to that. She has no desire to quit smoking. She has no tolerance for anyone saying anything to her about it. And so I said something with a lack of wisdom, right? So I was just reacting, and not taking stock of the situation to see what is actually beneficial. And yeah, so we need to develop to practice compassion, practice serving others with wisdom, right? What is actually beneficial in this situation, rather than being harmful. Right. Also, watching the motivation of guilt, right? Helping others because we feel guilty, or helping others, out of some sense of getting social approval from others, so that others feel think well of us, being careful about that, proving ourselves. So and then one other point I want to make is serving without attachment. This is so hard, but this will make it much more like pure and more likely to be helpful if we're serving without attachment, without an expectations of appreciation, etc., as we've talked about, and without expectation of that person changing, or that doing social justice without expectation that institution is going to change, but serving, working to benefit without expectation that they have to change, right? Helping my mom without me having an agenda. Right? Like when I have an agenda, it ends up biting me in the end, right? She'll resist it, right? Just serving because she needs it, right? And anyway, and right, oftentimes parents can fall into this, right? Like their selfless help toward their children, but unconsciously having an agenda for the kid, right? Like that they should, right, be a certain kind of a person or believe in what the parents believe in. So really being careful to try to give and allow the other person to be wherever they are, and not putting our agenda on them without being attached, and having attachment to right, to change, or attachment to the person that we're serving, acting in a particular way, is, that contributes to burnout, right? We work so hard and still that person doesn't change. We work so hard and still that person doesn't appreciate me. We work so hard and still she's smoking. Right. When we have attachment to results, or attachment to change, then we can easily get burned out and frustrated, angry. So doing it because it needs to be done, and trying to be happy about doing what we can realistically do, right, without depleting ourselves. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. I have more, but we can cover some of that next week. So any comments or questions on that? Healthy and unhealthy ways of serving or helping or fixing?
Hi, Emily. This is Elaine. One thing that I've really noticed is that people rush to help, especially giving advice. And really, many times the person speaking, the originator, they just want to be heard. It's sort of like the Kuan Yin thing, the hearer of cries. And the person they're speaking to is like, well, you should talk to a lawyer. Well, you should, try this diet. And they actually just really wanted an ear to hear them with compassion. And, that's a big struggle. I mean, you have to really bite your tongue sometimes, but, see if the person is looking for suggestions or they want to be heard.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's a really important point. A really important point. So I think of, exchanging self and others as listening more, right? Like when somebody's talking, right? Oftentimes we're waiting for them to finish talking, so and thinking about what our response is going to be, right? So really hearing, like, nonviolent communication is so wonderful. I find, like empathic listening, like listening for what their feelings are and what their needs are, right? Like really listening, reflecting back, reflecting back. And yeah, and giving unsolicited advice is rarely welcome, right? As you said, it's really hard not to give it, right? When we think we know better, or we know something that they don't know. But yeah, oftentimes, right, when we give unsolicited advice, the wall just goes up, right, with the other person. Yeah. So I mean, I agree. I think it's really important to try to really listen and hear what's going on for the other person. And it's also helpful to ask if they want any ask, as you were saying, ask if they just want to be heard, ask if they want to hear, any, would you, do you want to hear, something, comes up for me when you say this, do you want to hear, do you want to hear it? Or sometimes it's helpful to say, that, well, I've had a similar situation, and what's helped for me, instead of giving advice is, sometimes it can be helpful, if the situation seems appropriate, right, to share your own experience with, a frustrating person too, right? We all, right? Or that person who never listens, or that person who, is so inconsiderate. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. I mean, I think of this as this practice as being listening more and talking less. I mean, not all the time, of course. Sometimes, talking is very, useful and helpful. But just trying to listen more and not, not jump in with the solution, not jump in with our opinion, not jump in, and make it about me. And I think that also points to that that discomfort that we have with, right, another person is suffering, so I have to fix it, right? That's the fixer. I have to jump in and fix it and make it all better because I don't feel comfortable with you suffering, right? It's like,
Exactly.
yeah. And so it's useful to just see that, right? Joan Halifax, she does a lot of work with dying people, and she talks about, she mentions this one example of her sitting with a dying friend, and his wife, being so unable to just bear witness to the suffering, so she's like, he's in pain and laying in bed in pain and so uncomfortable, and she's like patting his arm saying, you're going to be okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, and fluffing up his pillows and things. When he's dying, there's like Joan Halifax, she says, there was nothing about the situation that was okay, but she was needing to do something, right? And what happens in that situation is that you can end up harming instead of helping. So one of our practices is learning to bear witness, to bear witness, just be present with the discomfort, with the suffering, without having to do something. And that's hard. And that our meditation practice is very helpful for that. Just learning to be with discomfort, learning to be with suffering. There's actually three. There's a Zen teacher named Bernie Glassman who developed this kind of these three tenets in serving others. And the first one is not knowing, right? Not knowing, like going into the situation with an open mind, like without, like oftentimes we go into a situation thinking that we have the answers, right? But going into the situation with an attitude of not knowing, and this is very Zen, not knowing, just paying attention and being open, paying attention to what is needed, what is appropriate in the situation. And then the second tenet is bearing witness, right? Just being there, learning to be present with suffering without having to do anything. And then the third step is compassionate action, right? So first entering the situation with not knowing, second bearing witness, and then compassionate action or non-action, we could say, is then based on not knowing and based on bearing witness, then we can see, well, what is the compassionate thing to do in this situation? Yeah, what is the helpful thing to do in this situation, or not do? Okay. All right, so thank you. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Anyway, I'll just say thanks a lot, and I feel like this is all very relevant for me, and so I'm just kind of following along and like really appreciating hearing this. And so I'll say that much. I think I could go into detail, but I'm not sure. That's the thing to do right now. So, but I'll also say that I'm interested in the book study, particularly because it seems like a topic that I would be kind of interested in diving into. It's really relevant for some of my struggles right now. So, yeah, particularly along the lines of kind of unraveling self-compassion and self-cherishing, and kind of getting caught in that mix of hurting myself and helping myself. And I've definitely found that, oddly enough, when I am more self-compassionate, it's just easier to actually be more effective at helping others, so serving others. So this seems just totally relevant. I guess I just want to say that.
that, you're right, the difference between self-compassion and self-cherishing. Yeah, that is such a tricky subject that the tradition does not address, right? And one of the misconceptions people have is, right, that self-compassion is self-cherishing or self-centeredness, and I don't agree with that. Right? I mean, there's a healthy level of self-compassion, right? That's necessary, right? Absolutely necessary to be able to practice, to be able to serve in a healthy way. Because one thing that Joan Halifax talks about is how sometimes people help because they have an emotional hole, right? They have a hole in themselves, right, that they're trying to fill, right? And so serving others or helping others is about filling our own hole. So, and which ends up oftentimes not being helpful to the other, right? Not being the appropriate action for the other person. So we need to make ourselves whole, WHOLE, right? We need to develop a healthy psyche, right? Which includes self-love and self-compassion and self-acceptance and self-kindness. That is the basis for being able to truly be of helpful, beneficial service to others, right? But then the self-love and self-compassion, it can go overboard into self-indulgence, right? And that's where we have to be, we have to be honest with ourselves. Are we, are we just taking care of, our genuine needs, or are we being self-absorbed and self-indulgent and taking care of ourselves at the expense of others? And that's where we have to check up, honestly, in our own minds. And it's a slippery slope, right? It's a fine line. So yeah, and it's practice, right? It's practice. Sometimes we'll fall over, too much on the end of helping others or serving others beyond our capacity, and sometimes we'll be self-indulgent and focus more on, right, and be more self-centered, right, and we'll cross that line many times, right? But gradually, as we practice, right, we find the right balance, right? Not too much of this and not too much of that. We find an appropriate balance through understanding what our genuine needs are, being realistic about what we need, being realistic about what we can do to help, right? So we'll fall into these, right? We'll fall over the edge again and again and again, and yeah. And not beating ourselves up about it. And that's just part of the process, right? Just being, having self-compassion. Okay, oh, I did that again, right? And just pick ourselves just up and keep going, right? So looks like we're out of time. I was going to do Tonglen today, but we'll do Tonglen next time. Yeah. So thank you very much. We'll dedicate. So any merit, any positive energy we've created this morning. Yeah, may it help us serve others more in a healthy way. being able to be more and more beneficial, be able to do more that's actually of benefit. And may we ultimately attain our highest potential, perfect, complete enlightenment, in order to be of the greatest benefit to ourselves and others. Yeah, and then let's dedicate once again for this pandemic to be rapidly brought under control. May the vaccines be effective, and may people be careful and considerate of others. May we stay healthy. And then let's dedicate for peace. Peace in this world. May we have a peaceful transition of government. And may there be less and less hatred. And more caring and compassion. Okay. Thank you. Everyone have a good week. Oh, and one thing, at some points I noticed that my voice was really soft. Was everybody okay with the sound?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
So this week, see if we can do the exchange of self and others, at least, let's say, to think as much about others' needs as our own, to consider others' needs as just as important as our own. And if we can, even more important, their others as being even more important than ours, in a healthy way, right? As we talked about today, right? Without, in a healthy way as much as we can. So we'll just try that this week. All right.
Thank you, Emily. I'm not going to be here next week, so I wanted to thank you so much on behalf of Lama Yeshe House for this teaching and course and all your support through the whole year. We're so grateful to you, and we wish you a safe holiday and hope you return to Lama Yeshe House in 2021.
Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for all of your work, and yeah, have a wonderful holiday. Stay safe, stay healthy. Okay.
Thank you, Emily. This was wonderful.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good week.
2